This video is a deep dive into forms in model-driven apps and all of the things that you can do with forms. A form is what you use to look at an individual record in the database. So I've got my contacts here inside my recruitment app, and I open the contact form, and this has got all of the information about it. I'm going to take you through all of the things you can do, and we're going to give this particular form a makeover. If you are a beginner to model-driven apps, please check out my tutorial first where I show you how to build this thing that I'm working with, and then come back over here for some more fun. If you're a Dynamics 365 sales or customer service user, welcome. This is exactly the same skill set underneath. It's just that you've got a different color banner at the top. So let's dive into what you can do with forms in model-driven apps. As always, I am starting in my solution here, which is the recruitment solution, and I'm going to work primarily on that contact table and that contact form to take you through all of the things you can do. Let's take a look at what's there at the moment, and we're going to have a lovely before and after picture by the time we've done here. So on the form, some critical components here. At the top, we have what's called a header. You have a few spaces. You've got 4 spaces that you can use here to put information that matters the most. Then we've got tabs. This is the summary tab. This is the details tab. So there's only 2 tabs there at the moment. On a tab, we have what's called sections. So this is a contact information section, this is a timeline section, and this is a blank section. This tab has 3 columns in it, so you can choose how many columns you have. This tab also has 3 columns and more sections. We've got sections that are underneath each other. So these are the main layout pieces that we're going to go through. On each of these sections, we have columns, table columns, not to be confused with a column layout. So table columns, also known as fields, and they are things that have already been configured on that table, and we can use a drag and drop experience to bring them into here. You can actually have multiple forms. So this is the contact form. If I've got more than one form for this particular table, for the contact table, I could switch across and have a look at a different experience in there. So depending on your use case, you might have users who need to see a different version of the form and different information on the form. That's something we can do. We're going to cover that off as well. So back into my solution here, and the first thing I'm going to do is navigate to the table that I want to work on, which is the contact table. And we've got the experience here of forms, and this will show us the forms that we've got in the system. I am going to come in here and click on the new form button, and it's going to bring up this brand new little pretty experience. Select the type of form to create. I'm going to go through all of these in this video, but the main form is the main game. So we're going to start there. The main form is the one we were just looking at. We are going to give this a name. So I'm going to call this one contact form for recruitment. What you want to be doing here, generally speaking, I'm working with a form in a standard out-of-the-box table. So the contact table, pretty much every app, well, maybe not every app, but many apps will use the contact table. So I'm starting again with a form, but this table already has that one that I was looking at in there. You can bring that in and do a save as, so you could start with opening that form and then save a copy and give it a new name, or you just start with a new form. So if you've got a brand new table that you've created for the first time, you'll have to do what I just did, which is why I showed it to you that way. But if you're working with one of the out-of-the-box tables in Dataverse, you can open an existing form, save a copy. Please save a copy. It's not good practice to change the one that comes out of the box. You might need that for reference later or for something else later. Always create a new version of a form when you're configuring things for your particular application solution. So hopefully what you see here is the sort of skeleton version of what we just looked at. We've got the header at the top, so that has my name there, which is this piece here is the owner. We have got the tabs, the summary and details tab, and I can navigate around in this maker experience and click on them just the same. And then I've got my sections, tabs, sections, columns. So we've got the sections in here. I want you to pay particular attention to this purple colored outline here, because that shows you what you're selected on, and it's going to make it a whole lot easier for you to not accidentally rename things, which is something I've done a fair few times. So at the moment I'm on the summary tab because I've got this whole thing with the purple outline. If I want to be working with my section, I can click on the section and see the purple outline is here. And what's happening on the side here is the properties have changed. So now I've got the properties for the section, whereas if I click on the tab, there are the properties for the tab. So just be careful about where you are. It's kind of easy to forget where you're at and get a little bit lost in it. The other thing I want to show you before we get into the good stuff here is this little guy at the bottom here. This can cause some trouble. This is actually showing you what the layout looks like. Now I'm working on a nice big monitor here, so responsive layout shows me the full 3 columns, but when I'm on my regular laptop monitor, this gets squished down. That's because the responsive layout will actually change based on the resolution of your screen. Let me see if I can do this. If I zoom up, you'll see now I've only got 2 columns. Now this is a great feature of the app because it will actually, you know, the model-driven apps and forms are fully responsive without you needing to do anything to take care of that. But when you're building the form, assuming you want to be building it looking at the layout as it is in full, if you're kind of not getting an optimal view with the size of your screen, have a look down here at the options. So this allows you to switch back and forth to say, what does it look like on a desktop? What does it look like on a tablet, which is more like that responsive option? What does it look like on a phone? And then allow me to work fully responsive. I'm going to leave it here for now, but when I'm working on a smaller screen, I tend to switch across to desktop just so that I can get that full version of it. You've also got the option here to zoom in and out. That's not doing the responsive thing, that's just filling the screen with the right thing. So depending where you are on the form, use that so that you've got a good view, either full view or zoomed in on some. So let's take a little bit of a spin around the features that you've got to work with here. This is a WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get, designer. So as we drag things onto here, that's pretty much how the form's going to look, and hopefully you can see that from what we've done so far. So my starting point here is I'm at the table columns, but I'm just going to go over to the top left and show you things. This hamburger menu here will expand out those items. That takes up too much space on the screen for my liking, so I tend to just work with that collapsed with the icons in there. This first one here, little jigsaw kind of icon, is your components. We're going to start with these layout components, which are your tabs and sections, but you'll see we'll come back to many of these. There are a lot of other kind of more advanced components that you can bring onto the screen. The second one is your table columns. These are the columns that you've already configured for the table. You can build more of them in here if you like, and we're going to move those across onto the form. This one here just gives you the sort of tree view of the whole thing. So this is showing me where I'm at with the summary section, and I've got some other pieces in there. That allows me to easily select the header. I tend not to use this one so much. I tend to work in these 2 pieces. This is where you can add JavaScript libraries if you're so inclined. I'm not going there. We're doing a low-code tutorial here. And business rules, again, we won't go there. We're going to focus on the form designs and the components here. So I tend to, again, you know, where your purple outline is, I just click where I want to be on the screen rather than using that tree menu, but it's there if that's what you prefer to do. So let's give this one a bit of an overhaul. Firstly, we can come in and remove stuff that we don't want. So what I've got here is a complete waste of space. There's something out of the box that's not enabled or not working. I am actually just going to click on that. Now you'll see that the purple border is inside the section. So I could click here to delete the whole section, or I could click here to delete the component that's sitting inside that section. I can simply hit the delete key on my keyboard, or you can use the delete key up there if you prefer. Just give it a second to catch up with you. You can come in and delete other things here. So let's have a look at something along here, fax, for instance. I did actually ask in a previous video who uses faxes, and I got some serious answers, but in general for my app here, I'm not going to be faxing anyone, so I'm just going to click delete on that one there. So that's how we can get rid of some of those things. We can come in here as well. Let's have a look at this. This is all out of the box. This is very much driven around a CRM type capability, but I'm building a recruitment app. So I don't actually want this whole billing section. Let's just get rid of that whole section there. I'm also not shipping anything to anyone, so let's delete that. You'll see that if I delete all of the sections in a column, it still just kind of leaves me with a blank one there. So I can move the sections around the screen as well. So let's say I want personal notes. Let's keep that, and I can drag that and bring it here, and see how I get a little arrow when it gets to the spot that I want. Let's put it above that, and now then I could also choose to say let's get rid of that blank section. So moving things around the screen is quite easy. Let's take a look at these other fields in here that are a little bit special. First name, middle name, last name, but you'll see here that it just looks like first name, last name. What we can do here, this is actually, if you click on it, this is actually a special sort of component for name, and there's a special one for address as well. This is designed to sort of enable a fully responsive experience with this and with the address fields. So you'll find you can't come in here and just delete one of them. You actually have to delete all of them and put them back. I will show you what I normally do with address, because I don't tend to use address 1, street 2, street 3, city. In my part of the world, it's not even called a zip code, so I will show you how we tidy those things up. So what I'm going to do is start to rearrange things, and I'm going to talk you through both the sort of the why and the how of this, because the drag and drop stuff is actually really easy, but the thought process is always the thing that makes the biggest difference. So if I look at this from a user point of view, this is this isn't good at all. There's a waste of space on the screen here. I have to scroll down there. We're not using maps, so that piece is sitting there just using wasted space. I prefer to have nice sections on the screen and have everything laid out in a way that makes it easier. So first thing I'm going to do here, contact information, all good. I'm actually going to add a new section in here and separate out that address piece. So let's come in here and have a look at the components, and the popular ones are here, the columns and the sections. So I'm going to add a 1-column section. Now, if I'm not clicked anywhere, it will just put it at the bottom of the column on the left. So if I come down here, you'll see I've got new section there. Let's get rid of the map because I don't want that. So delete that. And I'm going to drag this section up. Now here is where it can get a bit tricky with moving things around. You might need to zoom down a bit. What I'm actually going to do here is use I've got a scrolling wheel on my mouse. I'm actually clicking down and then scrolling on my mouse at the same time to bring that up to the spot where I want it to be. And I've also got this awkward situation here where I've got that left over from before. So let's delete that. So I'm going to call this section address. Now the other thing is make a choice between whether you want lowercase or uppercase on things, because now we've got timeline address and contact information like it's shouting. So if I click on the section over the side here, we've got the display option. So we've got the label for the section. Let's change that. So you can rename anything in here. This is where you change the name of that. And as soon as I click out of it, it will update. The other option you've got, you don't always have to have a label. So maybe sometimes you don't want that. If you check that hide label box, then that will disappear, and there it is back again. So those are your options. I'm actually going to get rid of this whole address thing because I don't much care for it, but you'll see what happens is I'm deleting that whole thing at once. And then what I want to do is bring the address columns into here, but just the ones that I want. So if I come across into my table columns here, what I can do is search for things, because this contact table has a lot going on, and depending on what you're working with, you might have very little or you might have a lot. So when you're bringing columns onto a form, you've got a couple of options to be aware of. Firstly, show only unused columns. That's always checked. Typically, you only want each thing on the form once, but you can bring it in more times if you want to bring it in somewhere else for a reason. That's okay. Just if you can't find it in the list, just make sure you uncheck that box so that you can get to it. We've got a search here, which I'll show you in a moment, but we've also got the option here to select between, are we looking at all the columns for this table, or the standard ones, the ones that come out of the box, or anything custom. So if I choose custom, you'll see that's a much smaller list than the standard ones, or all of them, where you've got everything that came out of the box with the contact table. So we'll go back to all. I'm working here with address, so I can choose that. Now this address 1 is this composite piece that I took away before that works sort of on the screen in this way that I don't want all of those things. But if I search for it, I see all of the other individual fields here as well. So I actually just want street 1, street 2, city, state, and postal code. Now you can make a decision here if you want to change the names of those labels in the data schema, like in the actual configuration of the table, you can change the names of those. But if for some reason you want the display name on a form to be different from the actual schema name, just be careful with this. It can get a bit confusing. It's usually better to sort of change it at the source, but if for some reason you want it to be like this, and I don't necessarily want to rename all of these things, but I find address 1, address 1, address 1, address 1, if I'm only using one address is too much. So what I'm doing here is just clicking on each of these and changing the label. So you can actually just choose to do that at a form level. This won't change the whole thing underneath. Those columns will still be called what they're called underneath, but I'm basically just changing the display of them on the form there. What else might I like to do here? Let's have a look at this tab. So this tab is 3 columns. Let's say I want the timeline to be over the right-hand side. So the timeline is a special piece. This is where we have all of our tracking of emails, phone calls, tasks, appointments, all of those kinds of things. It usually starts off in the middle. Whatever you're doing with your form layout, it's good practice to have it kind of consistently. So if you like it in the middle, try and keep it in the middle all the time. But if you want it somewhere else, make that change sort of throughout the app, because then the users are looking for things the same way all the time. So if I wanted to change the order of this, I can drag and drop it. Now be careful, I don't want just the timeline control, I want that whole section. So let's grab that section and move it across into that column on the right hand side and bring address, and you'll see it's left that blank new section in there. This is where it gets a little bit fiddly sometimes. It's just making sure you've got, like, do a click, get the thing and move it. See, look, it's just moved to the wrong place. Let's do that again. I'm going to leave this in to show you that it's not just you. If you have a bit of trouble sometimes moving things around, getting your screen zoom and stuff can make a big difference here. And I'm going to leave that section there for a minute because I might want that there. So I've moved those things around. On this tab, I can also work with different widths of the column. So let's say I really don't need as much width here. I want more width on the timeline. So with that tab selected, I've got the choice of the layout here. So I could choose to change it to 1, 2, or 3 columns. If I leave it as 3 columns, but I want to change the width. So see how this is 33, 42, 25, because it assumes that the timeline is wider in the middle, but I've moved it around now. Let's make this one 42 and this one 25. And you should see straight away it's changing that. Perhaps I want these two to be a little bit more even, so maybe let's go for a 30, 30, 40 split. And you can muck around with this and do whatever you like to get it right on the screen, and just try to optimize for having things that fit nicely on the screen rather than having them scroll across. You can have the timeline in its own whole tab as well if you want. So at the moment what I've got here is my summary tab and my details tab. You could actually add a whole other tab and put something in there. So if I go back to my components here, I can add a 1 column tab. That comes up at the top with new tab. So the first thing you want to do is click on that, give it a new label. Let's call this one timeline. And you can actually drag and drop across different sections. So if I come back here and get this and drag that to that tab there, give it a second. Come on. No. Let's try that again. I think I might have gone too slowly there. Let's bring it across into there. There we go. So the timeline is there. So if you want to do that kind of thing, you can have it take up the whole thing, or you can have a component take up the whole thing. I'm going to, with the magic of undo, say, oops, no, I don't like that idea now that I've done it. And then I'm going to delete that. So just to show you that you can kind of go backwards and undo those things, then we should have the timeline back in here. I might have to do an undo one more time to bring it back in. Talking while I'm doing this, I'm not concentrating on what I did when, and delete that timeline piece. So we'll come back in here. Now, while we're on the subject of the timeline you can configure from here. So this is the timeline where you can come in here and say, I want to add appointments, phone calls, tasks. These things, invite, redemption, and portal comment, are sort of standard things for a Power Pages portal. But if you're not using that, then that can be annoying to have in here. So you can choose, do I want both activities and notes, which I do. So right now I have got all of these different activities on the timeline. social activity, I'm not using that here. So if you open it up, you can just uncheck that and done. Same with this invite redemption. I don't want that one. And I also don't want the portal comment, so we can just go in and do that. You've also got sort of more sophisticated options for the ones you do want. So I want appointment here. I'm saying I do want it to be created directly from the timeline. And then I've got other commands that I'm allowing to happen. So let's say we're not going to use adding anything to a queue. I don't want that to be something that people can do, but you can choose all of those options. So there's quite a lot going on in there in configuring the timeline that you can work with. So far we've had a look at tabs and adding a new tab and removing a tab. We've had a look at sections and adding new sections and moving those things around in there. Let's, with this other new section here, create something a bit more specific for the recruitment scenario. So I've got the contact information and the address details in here. Let's call this one recruitment info, and I might want to promote that one to be up at the top here above the address because that's more important. And then I want to come in here and have a look at the different columns that I'm going to put on here. So this time I just want to have a look at the things that I've custom created. So I've got some things in here that I've created just for the recruitment scenario. These are, if you've watched my model driven apps tutorial, I've actually added a few more things in here. So this is a column called WWC valid to, which is a working with children check. So we've got a date on that. Now I just clicked on that and it's disappeared. Where did it go? Again, a little bit lazy with where my mouse is. It's ended up in the wrong place. I'm just going to delete that and do it properly. You can drag and drop it across, but you'll give yourself an easier experience if you say, this is the section where I want it to be. And now I just click on it and it will go into that section. I'm doing this in real time. It just takes that half a second that always makes you go, did it work? Oh, right, yeah, it's okay. So I've got the WWC valid to. I have also, what else do I want to put in here? Police check to see whether we've got a police check, and that'll do. You can also add additional columns from here. So if you come across and say new table column, let's say I had another piece of information I wanted to collect about the recruitment information. So I wanted something like last interview date or something like that. I can just add that in here, choose my data type. This is the same experience that you would have if you were creating it beforehand. Again, I find it better to think through the data model and create all those things, but if you're in this moment and you realize you've forgotten something and you want to add it in here, you can do that. If you are working from inside the solution, the way I showed you to start with, it will add that column into the solution as well. So no drama doing it this way. It is a good little backup that you've got in case you have forgotten to do something. So we'll just give that a second. It doesn't automatically add it onto the form. You do need to do that step. So let's just come in here and I just search for last interview date and just drag that across and put it in there. This is starting to look a little bit better now. Let's take a look at the header at the top here in case there's something else we want to add in here. I am just trying to think of something else that we could sensibly put in the header. What do we think? Let's come through. Perhaps we want their mobile phone in the header so that we've got quick and easy access as soon as we go in to find that. So you can either bring something from here or you can move something from the form. You can have it there twice if you want, but I'm going to take this and drag it up. So you'll see I've got that purple highlight when I bring it across into the top there. You've got 4 spots. This is your premium real estate. And if I want to change the order, you can just drag and drop in the same way that we saw earlier. Again, let's give that another go. There we go. And then the display options for the header here, we've got this show header flyout. This is the option here to be able to have more than 4 things in the header. So I don't recommend that. I think it's better if you've only got 4 things in the header, but if you do want more, then you can choose to have that one sitting there. I'm just going to switch that one off so that it's not there. Let's take a look at some of the more advanced features here. So we've seen these popular ones with the tabs and sections. We'll come back to the subgrids and the quick view, and we've already looked at the timeline. Let's just expand these other options here. So layout, you can actually choose to create tabs that have columns. So if I say I want a 3-column tab, that will add that in here. And that's got the 3 sections ready to go. You can always change that. That just gives you the starting point. So we can change that back to be a 1-column section. If you want to have different columns within the section, you can do that as well. So let's say I wanted to add a 2-column section that will come in here. So the sections are usually 1 column. Let's grab some just random fields in here. So let's create sort of credit hold and credit limit. We're going to get rid of these. These make no sense. But you'll see that you can actually have a section that's in 2 columns. The difference here is that you don't get that separation in between, but it is a way of kind of laying out the screen in a certain way. You can't mix up on a tab. The tab itself has to have a certain number of columns. So it's a 1-column tab, a 2-column tab, or a 3-column tab. So if you want to have something like this where the top section is 1 column, but then you want 2 or 3 columns below that, this is as close as you can get. You can't actually kind of create those in there with the nice gaps in between. So that's the best way that you can do it. I am going to get rid of that thing that makes no sense. I'm going to keep this new tab here though, because we are going to use it for something else in a second. So we'll come back here. So that's your layout options. We've also got within here the option to add in grids, which we're going to come back to. This is a really important feature around subgrids. But before we get to that, let's have a look at these display elements. So you can bring in different display elements. Actually, let's come back into this tab and bring a calendar control into here. So this will allow you to connect up to a calendar somewhere. So we can say we had an interview table in here. So if I scroll down and find my invitations, interviews. Actually, no, I just used appointments for interviews. So let's choose the appointments table. You need something, obviously, that has some kind of relevance to a calendar function. There's no point adding it on contact or something that doesn't make any sense. So we can see all of the appointments. So maybe we've got appointments from different people sharing that in there. And then which column do we want it to be based on? So I want that to be based on the actual start. The description could be the subject of the appointment. And then the end date will be the actual end date. And that should be enough. So we'll click on that. So that's going to give us a calendar component sitting on the form there. So let's actually give this tab a name. So we'll come back to this piece. So we've actually got 3 layers of headings now. There's a tab heading, a section heading, and the actual component heading here. So I definitely want to name the tab. Don't leave that named as new tab. So when I click on that, we can come across here and call this calendar. It doesn't make a lot of sense that I'm putting this on the contact table, by the way, but we're here, just I'm showing you some things. So we'll call that one calendar. Now this one actually has its own label. It's your choice stylistically where you want to put this. I tend to name the section rather than the component. So we'll call this one interview calendar. And then you don't want kind of layers and layers of headings unless that's helping. So if we come in here and let's say hide the label on that. So just be aware of the ability to have those labels or headings at those 3 levels, at the level of the tab, the section, and the component itself in some cases. And just choose carefully about where you want those to go and make sure you're choosing the right thing with the purple highlight in there. If I come back onto my main form here, some of the other display elements, so that's a calendar. You can embed a Canvas app as a widget in here. That's a bit too much, but let me know if you're interested in a video on that. You can bring an external website in here too. So if you choose to say external website, you just put the URL in there and it will show it on there. The other thing I want to show you here is these input controls. So you can add these different things in here. So we've got a business card reader, which you could use if you've got something where you've got a camera control or you're using it primarily on a device like an iPad or something. You can bring that in there and scan that. That's actually the same control you would use to add to a Canvas app. So there's some crossover in here. The checkbox and toggle are quite good for these things. So let's say the police check here. This is a yes/no column. So you could choose to say, I've got that highlighted and I want to use a different component here. So what we're going to do is come over here and with this one selected, so you can do it either way. I can say I either want a checkbox and then say which column will that be, but because I've already got the column on the form, I'm going to select it and come over here and say which component do I want, and it knows that it's a yes/no column, so it gives me the option to say that I want that to be a toggle. So we'll just give that a second to catch up, or you could choose to use the checkbox control. So those are your options there. Media, we can bring in that image. The map, you have to have maps enabled at the level of the environment in your Power Platform admin settings if you want to use that. I don't use that one terribly much. That business card reader is AI Builder. You can also bring a Power BI report onto a form as well if that's something you want to do. So the last thing I want to show you here, which is the most important thing, and this gets into some of these other forms as well, is the idea of subgrids and quick view forms. So this depends on which way the relationship goes. So first of all, if you want to do something that's a related table that's one-to-many, so a contact has many applications, then you would use what's called a subgrid. So if we come in here and want to see all of Emily's applications, you find that at the moment in the related menu. So everything that's a one-to-many is in that related menu. But if I come in here and say show related applications, firstly, I've had to come and go through all of those things. And then it just gives you this associated view, which is pretty much the application number and the created on date, which I really hate this experience. I think it's really bad design to not bring the related tables that are important to the application experience onto the form. This is one of the biggest benefits of working with a proper relational database and a model-driven app. So please do this part. So what we're going to do is, again, I quite like to add a new tab for this. So I'm going to add another one column tab in here, and I can change the order around. You can drag and drop the order of these things around as well. But let's call this one applications. And then this section, again, I'm going to give it a name, which is applications. And then I'm going to bring a subgrid control here. So you'll find this either under the popular section or under grid, but I'm just going to choose subgrid. And you always want to check this box. I don't know why you wouldn't want to check this box. Show related records. I don't want to see, if I don't check that, I will see all the applications for everyone. So if you've got a use case where you want to see a related table unfiltered by the record you're on, leave that unchecked. But I've never not checked that box. I wish it was checked by default. I want to show related records, and then related to the contact is all of their applications with them as a candidate. So we're going to do that. And then you can choose a view. And sometimes you might want to configure a different view specifically for this. For now, I'm just going to go with the active applications view. And again, we'll just give that a second to populate in there. Now this will always come with the very handy label new SG control. Let's just hide that, or give that a better name and hide it up here. Again, depending on your preference of how you like the spacing. So now what we've got instead of that related menu is this ability to say, when I'm on the contact, I'm just going to be able to go in and see all of those applications. If you want to work with something that is the other way around, so this is the one-to-many, we've got the one contact has many applications, but the other way around. So here I've got the account, which is a lookup to perhaps the organization that they're currently affiliated with. That's a many to one. That's a parent record. So that goes the other way around. Let's say I wanted to see information about that business that they're associated with on this account. That is where we can bring in what's called a quick view form. So you start by creating quick view forms on the table in question. So what I'm going to do here is, let's save this. So I'm going to just I haven't clicked saved, and we've been going for quite a long time. So that's always not such a good idea, but we've done that. We'll click save. Is go back into the account table and have a look at the idea of the quick view form that allows you to view something, or you can bring a whole form onto here. So we'll come to that in a second when it's finished saving. We'll just give it a second. Looking good. Okay, let's go back. I'm going to go back into my tables here and into my account table. Now, the account table wasn't previously in this solution, so I'm going to add an existing table, which is the account table. And I want to actually have a look at a certain form that's already there. So we're going to choose from the forms here. I want the one that's called the quick view form. So there's an account reference panel. That's the one that's out of the box. Again, if you're working with a custom table that you've created, you won't necessarily have those in there, but I just want to show you these pieces that are already there. So if I click through into account now and have a look at the forms, you'll see I've got this quick view form, and the way that this is configured is very similar to what we just saw. It's just that it is it's a much more contained thing. There are certain things you can't do here. If I come into the layout, I don't have the option to add tabs and things. things. This is just the same, but much more simplified. So this is giving me a heap of information. I don't want all of that, so I'm going to do this save a copy so that we don't have this. So we're going to say account reference panel for recruitment and save that. And then really all I want to see when I'm looking at this person and the organisation that they're currently associated with, I am stretching the use case here. I'm aware of that. You probably would not have this information, but let's figure out a way that this makes sense. I'm just teaching you the skills here. We don't want to see the annual revenue. We don't want to see all of the full address details of the account. We might just want to see the city. So you can see I can just get rid of some of those things. And then if you wanted to add any other things in there as well, you can do that. So maybe that will do. So let's save and publish that one. So whichever thing you're bringing in as the destination here, if I'm on the contact form and I want to bring in a quick view form from account, you need to first go to account and configure that. Let's go back into the tables and the contact table and have a look at the form again. So we'll go back into my contact form for recruitment. The idea of the quick view form is that it's read only. So it gives you just a visibility into what's going on with that. So I would perhaps want to bring all this out into a different section here to make this a little bit easier. So let's add another component here. I'm going to add a 1-column section. And you'll see this time that it's put it in the column where I'm working. Let's call this account information or current business, something like that. Let's bring the account name into there. So you'll see the thought process here of like, I want to group things together on the form to make a much better experience than just having things randomly scrolling around. I'm also going to sort of think carefully about the fact that this is creating too much of a scrollable experience here, so we might move these pieces around. Let's take the address here. You can actually put things on top of the timeline too, so you don't, if the timeline isn't something that's going to take up a whole column for you, then you could choose to put something like that on top of the timeline if you wanted to, but we'll leave it there. So we've got the account name. What I'm going to do now is bring this display element in here, which is the quick view, and then it will say which lookup column. It has to be that relationship where it's that parent record. It's choosing company name. That's about all I've got in here anyway. And then I'm going to choose that account reference panel for recruitment and click done. And that should bring that into this section here. So that's the thing that we just configured. The other thing you can do, so that will all be read-only. All the little locks here show you that it's read-only. I am going to just add another piece in here. So if I add another 1-column section in here, you can bring in a whole other form. Actually, let's do this in another tab. Let's add another 1-column tab in here, and we'll take this one right down to the end. And we will call this one account. What I can do is actually bring in a whole form for that related lookup table, and then find a form that we want to add in here. So for account, I have got the standard account form. That'll do. Let's add that in. That then becomes fully editable. So the difference between the quick view form is that it's a display only element, whereas the account is a complete editable situation. Let's give this a go. A couple more things just before we push this into the app and see what's going on. You have got here form settings. So this sets the security roles. So I said right at the start, you can have forms for different users. So you might have users in the system who have different visibility. This is not a way of controlling actual security, just a better user experience if some users need to see a layout in one way with different information than in others. But please don't use this to actually lock down security. You should be locking down security properly. So we could say this one is actually for everyone. We want this to be for everyone, or we only want it to be available for specific security roles. And then we can also choose the form order. So that affects this experience here, which one is going to come up at the top. So let's say this new one I'm quite happy with. I want to bring that right up to the top of the list and save and publish that experience as well. One final thing we need to do here, which is to make sure that this form is actually in the model-driven app. So depending on your model-driven app settings, you might have it set up, and I think this is the default now, is that all the forms go into the app. So you can see here that we've got all of these things sitting in the app, but we want to make sure that it's in there. Otherwise, this is the place where you can do all this work and publish, and then it doesn't work. So let's go back into the solution and go into the actual recruitment app here, and just make sure that for that table that we're talking about, and any of the quick view forms as well, we need to make sure are there. So I'm going to come in here to my contacts form, and you'll see these are the forms that are part of the app. So we've got a bunch of things. I've got some things here I don't want actually, so let's remove those from the experience because I actually am not using any of those portal things here. But you'll see these are the ones now that are not in the app, but I've got these ones in here and you can edit and move them around. So we should be able to save those changes, publish, and let's play and see how our makeover has done with this particular form here. And so now we have our beautifully made over form. How much better is this? We've now got things sectioned out. We're making full use of the space on the screen. That timeline will expand down as we go along. We have got the applications subgrid, so I can see for Emily all of her related applications without needing to go into that terrible related menu. There is a calendar there where I can browse through and have a look by day, week or month and see what's happening with the interview. That details section is much more tidied up. And then here is our piece with looking at that related parent table. Contoso is where she currently is, and we've got the information there that we asked for in that quick view form, as well as the ability to actually come in here and edit the account form. So this is now all of that information. Maybe we find out the phone number is something different and we can edit that from there. What do you think? Anything else you want to learn about building out forms in model-driven apps, please let me know in the comments. Full tutorial here. Thank you as always for watching.